Hi guys, welcome to today's video, and I'm going to show you 7 easy but effective cinematic moves that you can do with your Pocket 2 gimbal, which will immediately take your footage to the next level. Right, let's get straight into it. Okay, number 1 is the Dolly Shot. Now this is a classic shot in cinematography and it's used very frequently in a lot of films. Now this, fortunately, is very easy to do. Just simply take the Pocket 2 and perform a slide horizontally in either direction, but just try and keep it as level as possible. Now it's very important to keep the movement deliberate and firm, but try not to actually wobble the camera up or down. Now for beginners doing a dolly shot, to keep things simple, I suggest using the tilt lock mode in order to keep the horizon level and to minimize the up-down motions. But if you're a more advanced user with the Pocket 2, then I suggest you could check out the video linked up here and also in the description, which is about mastering the dolly shot, and that's going to go into a lot more detail and also do a lot more comparisons of the different modes. So the dolly shot is used to create more interest if the scene in front of the camera doesn't actually have very much motion. So the actual movement is done by the actual camera itself rather than by the scene, as we can see in these examples. But it's often also used to reveal a scene from behind an object. For example, it could be used to make a transition, maybe from behind a wall or maybe an object or maybe a plant, as these examples show. Let's now move on to the second one, which is the panning shot. So this is very different to the dolly shot in that the camera is actually making a arc action. So we're actually rotating our hand like this and revealing the scene in a horizontal motion. For the Pocket 2, this means that we put our gimbal into the pan follow or the follow mode and rotate the camera in a small arc with our hand to reveal the scene horizontally. Now the panning shot is not often used in cinematography as it can cause a little bit of a motion sickness for the viewer, particularly on large cinema screens. So it's used very occasionally. Now you may find it's used much more frequently on documentaries for the TV because of the smaller screen. So here's some examples of the panning shot in action. Now the actual panning shot is often overused by amateurs, especially when making walking videos. So I suggest that you make this shot quite sparingly, as it can make the footage look quite amateur. But it can be useful for revealing large landscapes. Alright, number 3 is the crane or the jib shot. So this shot is used a lot in Hollywood films, and it's used by a large crane or jib in the industry to raise the camera up to quite a high level. And we can easily replicate this by using our built-in jibs, which is our own arms and our body. So to do this, we can crouch down nice and low and to simply rise up with the body and stretch the arms up for a large distance. Or we can simply just stand still and just raise up the arm like this. Now for even greater distances, perhaps you could put the camera onto a selfie stick or maybe an extension rod, and you can actually have range of motion. Now for the actual gimbal mode, I suggest you use the pan or follow mode, because the camera, we want to actually move vertically and we don't actually want very much movement sideways. Alright, let's now move on to the fourth shot. Now this is the static shot. Now this is where the camera is simply staying still. Now you may find this sounds quite counterintuitive. For example, the gimbal is for making movements, so why would we want to have a still shot? But a still shot or a static shot can be used as a contrast to other gimbal moves. So in a cinematic sequence, for example, if the camera is constantly moving around, it will look a little bit like the Blair Witch Project, and it can look a little bit tiresome for the viewer. So dropping in the occasional static shot can make the sequence a lot more interesting. However, a static shot will only be quite effective if there's actually some movement in the scene itself. For example, there could be some wind blowing in the trees, like I've got up here, or the wind in the river, or for example, waterfall or leaves blowing. If there's no movement at all in the scene, then the static shot is going to look quite boring. So it's going to look a lot like a photo. Now, to perform a static shot, of course, you can just simply keep the camera steady as you can, and the gimbal itself is going to prevent any micro movements and small shakes. But you can also try using the gimbal lock feature where you see the little lock icon. And that's going to actually help keep the camera steady even more by keeping the camera locked on the direction at which when the lock is engaged. Let's now move on, and the next shot is the push forward. Now this is simply where the camera moves forward on a level plane towards the scene. And let me just do this sideways like this. So it's simply going to move like this. And you're going to push forward with your feet. Now this shot is used a lot, in particular in thriller or horror movies, to create tension and mystery for the actual viewer. It's also used to create a sense of exploring a scene, perhaps moving towards a large building or moving down the street. Now for this move, I suggest you put the Pocket into the tilt lock mode, as you want to keep the gimbal level vertically and then slowly walk forwards towards the scene like this. Perhaps you could do the ninja walk and try to minimize the up-down motion. Now for more advanced users, try using the gimbal lock mode and simply just position the camera onto the focal point, walk forwards and engage the lock. So the lock mode should help minimize the small micro movements as we move forwards. As before, let's have a look at some examples of this move in action. Okay, next we have the pull back. Now this is simply the reverse of the push forwards. Now the camera simply moves backwards on level plane away from the scene, revealing the scene. So this is used in Hollywood to reveal the scene in movies. Now the camera might show a small section and then gradually pull backwards to reveal a large scene as a way of establishing location. Let's of course look at some examples. Now to perform this move, it's exactly the same as when we are pushing forward. So put the camera onto tilt lock mode or the gimbal lock mode, and then carefully and very carefully walk backwards, but of course watch your step. So we're going to simply walk backwards like this and then reveal the scene without crashing into anything behind here. And now onto the most energetic move. All the other moves up to this point can be done either standing still or just moving very slowly. So this next move requires moving a larger distance for it to be effective. Now in Hollywood, this is usually a tracking shot where the camera is moving sideways, following an object that is moving, perhaps a person or maybe a vehicle. We can use this shot to create a lot of interest in the viewer as the scenery is moving past. Now to do this shot, simply point the camera towards the scene and just move sideways, like walking like a crab, nice and quickly. I also suggest again using the tilt lock mode as we are moving in a horizontal plane and we want to minimize our up-down motions. For the maximum effect, I suggest getting something of interest in the foreground so that it adds some movement to the shots. But also the further the distance, the more effective and more impressive looking for the shot. Now let's of course look at examples of the sliding shots with this building, for example, to see the effect. Okay, so I've shown you 7 basic and easy cinematic moves that you can do with your Pocket 2 gimbal. Now if you learn these moves, guys, it's going to elevate your footage to the next level and it's going to make your footage look much more professional and cinematic. Now in true student style, I'm going to set you some homework. So your homework is to practice each of these shots with your Pocket 2 gimbal until you are fully comfortable with them and you can perform them well. Now it doesn't matter what the subject is or if you throw away the footage, just keep practicing until the movements become second nature. Also, as some additional homework, next time you watch a movie or TV, analyze the camera movements and see if you can identify each shot that they are using. Now you're going to be amazed how often these 7 shots that I've showed you are used in movies and TV programs. Probably the vast majority will be any one of these moves. Well, once again guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video and you've learnt something useful. Now in future I'm going to be expanding on our knowledge further on these cinematic moves, and we're going to introduce a lot more advanced motions. Okay guys, well of course don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get notified when these actual videos come out. Thanks for watching and I shall see you soon.